What does black wealth mean to you?
The nuclear family, marriage, and values is what black wealth means to me. I always celebrate when my mates get married or engaged more than I celebrate if they did 7 to 8 figures in their business. I know, to that point that Shopi made, is you don't need another business idea, you need a wife.
Do you remember the moment when you realized your business was doing 7 figures?
Ooh, that's a very good question. It was
Hey everyone, welcome to today's episode of the Mr. MoneyJar Show. I am your host, Rotimi Merriman Johnson. Today we are joined by 7-figure entrepreneur Mas Manima, father, husband, and good friend, and birthday twin of mine. Actually, we had a great conversation today about business, about marriage, how to raise kids, and also about what masculinity means in the 21st century in the UK as well. I just know you're going to love this episode, so let's get into it. Maz, over the past 6 years, you have built a 7-figure marketing agency,
Mhm.
Translate Culture. Please tell us about why you started this business and a bit about your business journey as well.
yeah, yes, I think the name is probably a good uh, starting point. Um, so prior to starting the business, I had worked corporate and built a bit of a reputation within my local area as somebody who'd obviously done relatively well from a corporate job. But I always had like a bit of like an itchiness to start something myself. So I started learning around digital marketing and built a reputation within my local area. And what was really fascinating is all my friends that had business ideas will come to me and be like, "Oh, Maz, can you do, some marketing for us?" So I kind of learned digital marketing through that way. But what I was always super interested in was almost kind of articulating to them the more technical part of digital marketing. So it's basically translating to them what the numbers mean in terms of performance. And I found myself doing that in my career as well, just kind of being somebody who could speak to people from different cultures. So initially, the company was meant to be a data and insight company. So ultimately, what I'll do is I'll go into an organization and I'll look at your data and I can storytell it in a way where anyone in the organization can understand it. Unfortunately for me, the community that I had access to didn't want that. They just wanted to grow through paid ads. So I had a track record, obviously, with my friend's business, but also my wife's business. So my wife used to have a store on Etsy selling African print homeware.
Bespoke Binny.
Bespoke Binny, correctly, yeah. And something just told me to start blogging what I was doing. So any changes I was making, I was blogging it. And then 2019, the Evening Standard picked it up and documented me as somebody who used their skills from work to grow their own family business. And then loads of people started reaching out. Started a WhatsApp group, which I believe you were part of as well. And then we used to do these meetups where I was just using it as an opportunity to educate people, but also learn what problems those businesses had. And it just got to a point where I built enough reputation where people are like, well, can you do the same thing you did for your wife's business for mine, which is essentially run Facebook ads? And I started doing that. And in 2019, decided to register the company's Translate Culture. And yeah, 6 years on, we're here today.
And are there any business milestones that you're particularly proud of over the past 6 years? I believe you recently posted about one
I
the
did,
past week.
yes. I had five. Um, so there's quite a few. We were the first agency in the country to host an event at Meta's head office. So that was quite high up. Um, we did a report with Treasure Tress around the opportunity in the black hair care market. That was another highlight. But the highest one was actually a TV campaign for Rooker, which my daughter and I were involved in, and our mutual friend Andy Ayim was also part of, and his daughter, and they're both best friends as well. So it's really this amazing moment where us as friends. He's an investor in Rooker. I obviously did marketing for Rooker, and I'm an advisor to the business, and to have both of us in that on that campaign, and my daughter to this day goes onto YouTube to see how many views it's got. Um, yeah, that for me was the proudest moment, just to be able to also show her the work that I do, and the impact that we're having with the work we do. So yeah, there's been a few highlights, but that one is like top tier.
In terms of family. You also recently posted your revenue milestone, 100 million.
Yeah, so that's the. Well, I wish it was my revenue. It's
Oh,
it's the revenue we've generated.
collective revenue.
Yes, yeah. If it was 100, I wouldn't be here if
Yeah.
I had generated.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
No, I'm playing. I'll
Yeah.
still be here.
Yeah.
But that's how much revenue we've generated our clients across the
Yes.
6 years, which for me is like mind-boggling when I think about it. And where I'm most proud of is that most of those are friends' businesses. So
Mhm.
these are people that have become friends. These are people who were my friends prior to being clients. And obviously some of that is with bigger organizations that we've now supported. But um, yeah, I just sat back and I was just like thinking, how did we get here? You know, when I started, we were spending hundreds of pounds on ads, and so we got to a point where we're spending millions of pounds for brands. So, and it was a pivotal moment as well for us to take the next milestone, which was, so we actually moved office. So I used to have an office in Wood Green, where my local area where I grew up, and I have the luxury to just walk to the office every 15 minutes and stuff, and it's brilliant. And my team always, joke about like, would you ever leave Wood Green? Like they'll ask me, like, if you were a billionaire, what would you do? I'll just go for a walk in Ali Pali. So I'm a very home type person, like very community orientated. But it meant that it got to a stage where I felt actually as a leader within my organization and also within my community, I need to show the boldness of taking the next step, because it felt really comfortable.
Mhm.
But I know that we can have much greater impact. So we've decided to move to central London, but more so we could be closer to our clients, because some of our client profile has changed. My team jokingly call me Mayfair Maz now,
Oh.
but I'm like, well, I wish I can afford an office in Mayfair. But it's a strong representation of you know the inspiration and the aspiration of a community can have, and how they can champion you when you've done something that may seem unachievable. And I always look back in my story. I've always felt like whenever I've achieved something, whether it's academically, you know, my friends and my community always celebrated me. So it just felt like hitting that 100 million mark and then really investing in ourselves and going beyond our shores, essentially, is how I define
It's
it.
a phenomenal milestone, and it's been a real privilege to also witness the growth in real time. And one thing I'll say about you, Maz, is you've been extremely consistent in terms of your passion, which I think is bringing people together, whether that be within 10x10 WhatsApp group. You're very vocal in there, sharing your gems, whether that be in the Hadfield Capital Investing group,
Yeah.
the DTC WhatsApp group,
Yeah.
because lockdown times we weren't seeing each other in person, so it did have to be on WhatsApp. Whether that be the director culture conferences and retreats, like I have always believed that your calling is far higher than your core marketing business. It's actually about just bringing the community together and sharing and letting them network. So it's been really great to see. If we stay on this topic of community,
Mhm.
are there any Black British entrepreneurs that you admire, and why?
Yeah, there's a few. Obviously, there's a lot of people you see from afar, um, but interestingly, closer to home, I would say Tendai from Rooker. Just because I know the journey that she's been on as an entrepreneur, I don't think she gets enough of her flowers.
She's phenomenal.
She's phenomenal,
I saw her speak at your retreat this
yeah,
year.
she's incredible. And I've always said, if I had to start a business and be an investor, I would have Yao from Ava Estelle as my COO, very strong operational. I'll have Amma as my CMO, Amma from PlantMade, and I'll have Tendai as my CEO. Um, she's just incredible. I think the what I love about her and her team, they are going into an industry that's been a challenge for a number of brands. So the Afro hair care market, and they are going in there and actually bringing in technology. Like they really want to make safer hair products for Black women. And the beautiful thing about it is she's managed to storytell and articulate that mission strongly enough that her investors, when you look at her cap table, is so diverse, right? There's people from our community, there's people from, there's people from tech VCs as well as consumer VCs. And she's faced a lot of challenges along the way, and how she's been able to pivot and persevere. And I think perseverance is one key thing that I think all entrepreneurs need. I think all of us need in life, but especially in entrepreneurship is one. So she's like definitely somebody that I I look to and I just like admire the work that she's doing. But more broadly, yeah, I was actually, thinking about this the other day around, also entrepreneurs that aren't Black
Okay.
that we could also look
Sure.
to get. There's a guy called, I think his name is Richard Harpin, and I only discovered him through YouTube. And he's a guy, much older gentleman. He had a company called HomeServe, and
I think I've heard of it.
yeah. And what's really fascinating about his story is, yeah, he had a, like the rest of us, you graduate, you get a job. He moved industry, worked for Procter and Gamble, then he went into management accounting, then he did this bit of letting on the side hustling. And what I like about him, his journey is very similar to mine in that if you looked at it, you'd be thinking these pivots don't make sense. You went from Procter and Gamble to, consulting, and you're starting to, I started at Nissan, which is a car company. Then I moved to the British Medical Journal. Then I did ecom, and even now as a business, we're pivoting. But what I loved about him is he sold his business for 4 billion after like 40 years of building it, and he's now in his philanthropy journey and he's investing in youth and all that type of stuff. And what I'm hoping for within our community is we need having more of those types of people, right? And you talk about wealth is built over time.
Hmm.
I guess we've just not had the time experience of somebody to have built a business for 40 years to then exit at that level. And then to actually see what happens when you achieve that level of wealth. So he's been a very interesting one. I'll always encourage people in our community to also look out more broadly, because you'd find that there are some similarities in people not from our community as well. But I think I look for the day where we could have big exits like that, and those people can then reinvest in our community and really think long term around philanthropy.
Yeah, we're a young population, both in terms of average age. The average age of a Black British person is around 30 compared to 40 for the general population. And we talk about building a business over 40 years. I mean, have any of us even been here for 40 years? So
Yeah.
I think a recurring theme with a lot of the guests that come on this podcast will be that whilst we may be looking for people to emulate and to inspire us, you're actually going to be that person. You're that person to your daughters and to other aspiring entrepreneurs in the UK as well. So when we look back, it'll be like, oh, Maz built this business back in 2019 and look at what it's grown into.
Yeah, that's actually a good way to put it. And just to add on to that, you've been a very strong champion of reminding me of that mission. So one of the statements that I made at that Meta event was, it's deeper than ads. Like our mission is more than ads. And I always remember you referring back to me saying, Maz, you were put on earth more than just running Facebook ads, which is funny. Some people might have taken that as an offense, but I actually agreed with you because you saw the work I was doing prior to that. And I literally got into ads because it's a form of service of what the community needs now. And I just got tired of telling people that to do. I was like, well, I might as well just do it for you guys. And then we built a business from it. So I appreciate your feedback as always.
Thank you. Thank you for quoting me.
Yeah.
Obviously we follow each other, we interact on socials a lot, but anyone who checks you out online will notice that you're a businessman, but you're also a music fan as well. And you quote a lot of the greats, including Jay-Z. And I wondered if you could answer this question with your entrepreneurial hat on. If it came to dinner with Jay-Z or taking 500K, which of the two would you take? And why are the people who would take the opposite wrong? Because this was a really big viral question on the internet a few years ago.
And it's funny because for a very long time, I was team dinner.
Really?
Then I went team 500K.
Okay.
I put my entrepreneurial hat on, I'll take the 500K. I just think, and he even said it himself. He said, most of my lessons are in the music. And I know most of his lyrics. So in fact, most of I've used it as a way to navigate business and some of the challenges I've had. So one of my favorite Jay-Z lyrics is, if every person in your clique is rich, your clique is rugged. Nobody will fall because everybody will be each other's crutches, right? So that basically, if your circle of friends and community is wealthy, then you have a support network where you actually could take more risk. And I fundamentally believe that, and that's how my nature in business. So that's why I would take the 500K, because it's like the lessons in the music, and also in the press. Like, there's loads of things you can read if you want to learn from him. And why would somebody that thinks the other way be wrong is to that point where I think sometimes we over idolize people in a sense of that they're going to give us a word of wisdom that's just going to change our life. Actually, what you end up finding is that they got there by doing.
Not by going to dinner with other people.
Exactly. Exactly. They got there by doing. And I know this because I have loads of friends that are successful, and some of them are influencers and they're well known. And I always remember once one of my mates was trying to get another one of our friends who's an influencer to do some sort of course to teach people how to be an influencer.
Sure.
And she was like, to be honest, I was winging it. I just showed up every single day and there's nothing I could teach. I think there's magic in that. There's some element of truth in that. Like, people like me and you are analytical. We can study people and then create a framework on what it takes to be a success. I think we're useful in that, and we can write books, we can write articles about it. I think that's useful, but most people, it's better just for all of us. It's better just to do, and I think as you do, you then are able to then connect the dots and figure out what worked. And one of the best quotes I think Gary Vee disclosed, which I stand by and I share with my team every day, is most of the time strategy follows action, not the other way around. So if you're too focused on building a strategy so you can take action, sometimes it doesn't work like that. You've got to take the action and realize, oh, every time I've done this, it's worked. So then let's create a strategy where next time we start a business, this is the first thing we do. And that may not work in 6 months' time because things change, algorithms change, whatever. So action is key. So I would say I'll take the 500K because I know where to invest it and actually make what I could do with the money. And yeah, I think everybody should do that.
I have one more business question for you, which is, do you remember the moment when you realized your business was doing 7 figures?
Ooh, that's a very good question. It was actually it would have been in August sometime, maybe a couple years ago. Because that's when we close our annual, and I've just usually send my board of advisors a bit of an update on like, hey, how we're doing and so forth. And to be honest, it was just kind of like, wow, like there's a Drake lyric which goes, I've been playing so long I didn't notice I was winning, right? But for me, it was never really about the money, if I'm 100% honest. I think my family's, God willing, in a really good position, and I have great friends and people like yourself. So like, I feel wealthy, irrespective of what my bank account or my business looks like. But the work we were doing was so fulfilling that I probably just missed it. But obviously, when you've got to like, eventually grow the business, whether it's to take, friends and family investment or whether it's to go to a bank and get a loan for growth, you need to look at those numbers and actually realize when you're sending in your reports, like, oh my gosh, we've actually generated a substantial amount of revenue. So yeah, it's probably a couple of years ago when I sort of realized that we turned over £1 million in that first 4 years of the business. And yeah, it's quite a pleasant surprise, but we've got more to do.
Love that for you, man. So you're also unique in the sense that you work with your wife, who you've been happily married to for how many years?
So we got married so we got married twice technically.
Okay.
So we got married in 2014, which was our traditional.
Okay.
And then we did the sort of I don't know what you
legal.
Call it. Yeah, the legal. That's it. Yeah, because we always say the white wedding. I'm like, I don't know what that means.
Yeah.
It's like, what does that mean? So we did the legal in 2015. So technically, we had 11 years. Yeah, be 11 years.
Big congratulations. How do you balance being husband and wife and business partners?
It's actually a lot easier now than it was before. So, like I said, the first, if you want to call it client, was my wife, or the first person I tested my skills on properly was her. It's hard. So the hard thing is knowing the boundaries of when like you stop. Like, so we'll go on dates and I'll be talking about work and she's like, come on, man. Like, it's so hard. But now we're in a good position where like, so I think it was a few weeks ago, the kids went to my in-laws and we just went on a walk and I left my phone at home by mistake and we just talked. and I caught up on everything, like asked her about her friends and all that kind of shit. And it was the best moment we've had together in the last few years of the marriage. And I guess that's the difficult part, is knowing, creating those boundaries of like, we're on a date. Like, I don't need to know about whether that invoice
The
was
Excel
sent.
spreadsheet. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But it's hard because it's also, I always say this, look, when you're married, there's one person outside of yourself that knows you more than, like, outside of yourself, that's the person that knows you the most in the world, right? They know times when you were scared to send an invoice, or times that you had faced imposter syndrome because this client that you thought was too, you know what I mean? Like, my wife has seen me go through all those things, and obviously vice versa when she had her business. But it's like knowing that this person loves you irrespective of this business, or irrespective of what society thinks about you, is helpful. Like, I know if I lost everything, my wife would still be there. Like, you know what I'm trying to say? So that's helpful. And then the hard part then is also about like the ego of, you know, you've both got your own vision, right? So like, my wife is also, she's got a little startup that she's putting together, trying to help women navigate being mothers, and
Okay.
it's quite a, she's got really big ambitions for it, but she's also understanding that in this season, translate culture and direct culture is priority for our home. But my thing is like, let's still invest and nurture that seed. So the key lesson is communication. You've just got to you got to have those tough conversations of like, when things aren't being met, you have to have those conversations, but from a place of love, just to know that we're working on this together. It's not my business, it's our business, irrespective of the fact that, translate is technically my business, but direct culture is both our businesses. So yeah, it's not easy, but it's getting better. And I think it's just around creating boundaries and actually knowing what we're trying to achieve together.
Let's get practical with it, because I've just started to work with my fiance as well. And one of the boundaries that we have is no talking about work after 9 p.m. Do I observe that boundary? Sometimes. But like, it's from a place of excitement and stuff, and we both really believe in what we're building. So if we get like a practical boundary that people who are couples but also business partners can put in place.
Yeah, so that's a good one. I'd actually give you a practical one which helped us, and it might actually help you in terms of, because obviously you said fiance, so marriage is on the way. I actually learned this from my mentor on my job when I was working at Nissan. It was when when we were getting married, she was so excited around the wedding, right? Like, she was doing all the planning, and every day we would just be talking about, like, it almost felt like I had decision fatigue, right? So it was like, this, should we do this, should we do that? Because she was super excited. And the advice that I got from my colleague was to have something called Wedding Wednesday, where for the rest of the week we don't talk about nothing about the wedding. But on Wednesday we have dinner, and you bring all of your excitement and all the things that all the things that you wanted to do, that you want me to make this, and we make decisions on that day. I was like, wow, we tested it. But then we also built on it. We then had like a meatless Monday, so we'll like make sure we don't eat meat on that day. So,
All right.
so I think try to gamify it a little bit.
All right.
The 9 p.m. thing, I don't know if I could say an email comes in at 9:01 and you need to. So I think maybe you can gamify it around days rather than time.
Yeah. The concept's similar, right? It's about batching.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Whether it's to a day or to a particular.
Yeah.
I've got a quote here from our friend Chopin Aguilusi. One of the best life advice, this is from one of your posts. One of the best life advice I received was from my brother Chopin whilst I was juggling different business ideas. He candidly said, "Bro, you don't need another business idea. You need a wife."
Yes.
As a man who's been married for 11 years, what are the keys, say 3 keys to a successful marriage?
Yeah, so that was very timely for him to have said that message. I would say the one thing about marriage, it exposes so much of you that you weren't necessarily aware of, like whether it's childhood trauma, whether it's the differences where you grew up. Obviously, you come from different households and whatever. So the first thing I think the lesson I've learned from marriage is you've got to go into it with a certain level of vulnerability to unlearn, relearn, and keep learning on who you are. And maybe there are positive things that you picked up in your upbringing that you can bring into the household, and it becomes a melting pot of these are our values that we collectively choose to work on. And I think for me, my wife and I, we both grew up in households with single parent households, right? So we always wanted to not have that. Like marriage was very important for us. But even within that, we then had totally different household experiences in terms of, how to resolve conflict, how to raise children. And I had to do a lot of unlearning and vice versa. So the first part is almost kind of agreeing that we're going to go on a journey together. Because the moment you say I do, like, this is the thing that is going to be lasting till death do us part. So then it's like, well, the kids, they're going to be old enough. They're going to get married. They're going to be gone. Me and you are on this journey.
Hmm.
So in the next 50 to 100 years, whatever, we just need to unpack and repack and then develop I guess a framework or value system that you won't be able to see, let's use business terminology, the ROI of it until your kids then get married
Yeah.
and they become a reflection of I guess the good things. That's what you'd hope for. You'd hope for your children and also your friends and people, your community, to borrow the good things that you've collectively put together. So that's one part, value alignment and just being open and vulnerable. Um, and the other thing is that seasons, like everything in life, there are seasons. There's going to be seasons when, um, you know, you're going to be best friends. There's going to be seasons when you're not going to be so best friends because somebody else might have, a challenging time and maybe something else they have to go through, and you just have to endure like that season in the sense that you might be the one that's upset them because you've not understood them. And it's very interesting because I sent my wife a message recently around I don't know if Aisha Curry, Steph Curry's missus, was talking about how she had this vision for her life, and then all of, and it's a very interesting concept. But because I had conversations with my wife about things like this, is that it's very complex to be a mother. Like it's a super complex thing to have the children that want you 24/7. Even though I'm the dad, my kids is always mummy first, right? And it's draining. And my wife, for the last few years, is, you could say, work from home and helping a bit. And some people may look at it and be like, oh, like that's an easy life, like, all this type of stuff. But it isn't, because there's still a emotional responsibility that you have. And I think for me is understanding that these seasons do come. So there'll be time when my wife's just tired and I'll ask her, like, why are you tired? Like, did you do anything? And she's like, I'm just tired. And it's also understanding, like, you don't just become tired from doing something physically. It could just be that there's so much in your mind of other people's responsibilities that you have to take care of. And so I think that's the thing, is just understand. And then obviously, as people get older, there's menopause or there's hormonal changes as well. And then also from the men's side, it could be something around just what feels like success to a man, maybe his business or his sometimes his football team, like all of these covers. I realize that it's actually not about you. It's just this person's going through a season, and you just have to kind of be there. So that's the second thing. And then I think the last thing is just for me, it's the greatest commitment that you can make in the world. And you've shared so many times the data around two-parent homes and marriage, like in terms of building wealth. Like it's one of the few things that actually correlates very well in terms of. So not only selfishly is it's a strong commitment for yourself and your partner, because people live longer. That's another aspect of it. But also for society, like actually being married is of positive benefit to us as humans. So it's just understanding that and figuring a way out, to make it work as much as possible.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
Within the Black African community, the lone parenthood rate in this country is about 40%, and within the Black Caribbean community, it's around 60%.
Mm-hmm.
So, in my opinion, the single biggest thing we can do to build wealth in this country is to secure the nuclear family.
Agreed.
That is the foundation upon which everything is built, which
Mhm.
is why I think it's amazing that you and all the other dads that I know, and mums too, like mums are the core, but like shout out to the dads too for being present and for raising their kids and for juggling all these different things.
Yeah.
You wear so many hats
hmm
in your
Yeah.
life.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask you specifically, actually, because it's ongoing now. What is your perspective as a husband and a father to Aisha Curry's
hmm
comments about not ever wanting to be married, not expecting to have kids
Yeah.
so early, now that she's with a really successful like basketball player?
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because my wife and I have been speaking about this, and when it came through my timeline, um, for once in that type of conversation, I kind of got it because I'm still having those conversations, right? Because most people will look at that and say she's married to one of the most successful men in sports. What more does she need? This, and that. But what I've learned is people have a purpose that is bigger than money. We talked about this, right? Like you said, my purpose is bigger than ads or whatever. So it's like if I had achieved massive success by winning the lottery, I probably would still use that money to try to do something for my community because that's what it is. And I think for her, she's obviously had a vision for herself and it hasn't played out. And she's therefore, it doesn't sound like me, she's questioning her marriage. It doesn't sound like she's questioning her children. It sounds like she's just like expressing the fact that her life hasn't played out the way she had in her mind. And I was having a conversation with my wife about this as well. And, she's of a similar view. She's like, look, people are making it seem worse than it is. And I think the challenge that she has is on the other hand, you have LeBron James and his wife. And LeBron James's wife is pictured as like the perfect wife. And LeBron is pictured as the perfect sports person. And I think it's unfair that people make those comparisons because then you don't allow people to express challenges. And I think she's brave enough to share it publicly. I personally wouldn't because I know how society can be. But also, it sounds like Steph doesn't have an issue with it because otherwise, I don't think she would have shared it. But what was interesting, his response, one of the things she mentioned, he's like, it's not true. It's like, that's not like, why are you worried? Like, which I'll be honest, I've been in those conversations before where it's, whether it's somebody in my family or somebody that's close has made a statement of, which could arguably be seen as them being ungrateful. But what you start to realize after a while is that two things can be true, right? So two things can be true that you could have everything that society thinks is a success, but you might still feel empty because there's something else that you want to achieve and discover. And look, and maybe you may get that thing and then realize that there's something else. So my view is, I think she's brave sharing it. But I think we shouldn't undermine people's desire for exploration and curiosity. Because they have what we think is success. And my wife always told me this because she used to be a therapist, and people used to say to her like, because she was working in quite a affluent area, and people used to, and she used to get really upset about this. People like say, what do rich people need therapy for? She's like, they're people. But the reason people say that is because money is your worry, right? If money is the reason why you're stressed, then that's the remedy to your problem. But they will have problems elsewhere. I think it's that. It's people are like, give me Steph Curry and millions of pounds. I'll have 60 kids. Until you go through that situation and realize actually there's probably a bit more to life than this.
Familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs?
Yes.
Yeah. So at the top, you've got self-actualization, which is a growth need, but all the needs below
hmm
the bottom four layers are what we call deficiency needs. So the physiological safety, the food. If you are hungry, food is literally all you can think about. But
Exactly.
then once you're full, you're not thinking about it anymore. It's the same with money. When you don't have money, life really sucks.
Mhm.
But then once you earn a certain amount, then it ceases to play into things as much. And there's a great documentary on Netflix called Happy. I think came out a few years ago, where they found that the amount was around $50,000
Okay.
that you needed to earn to have like a happy life.
Mm.
So below that, you're in quite a lot of pain, but then above that, there was only so the pairs of jeans you were buying and the car you were driving could only be so much better. Essentially, there was diminishing returns on your cash.
Yeah, I agree with that.
You are not just a husband, but you're also a father.
Mhm.
What has fatherhood taught you?
Very interesting question. A lot, I would say. But to be more practical, I think for me is around conflict resolution. And there's a good friend of mine, I won't say his name, but he told me a story of his partner, how he just admired how her parents resolved like challenges. And whereas, the household I grew up in is like, you know, you don't argue in front of the kids. You don't, you try to play the thing. But actually, the story he shared, which is something that me and Natalie have replied, is actually you can. There's a different level when you argue. See, if it's like confrontational and it's loud and it's violent, that's you shouldn't do that to anyone anyway, not even in front of your children. But it's okay to if your children to see two different points of views and conflict. Let's for the lack of a better word, the resolution is key. I remember I'll give you a bit of a story. So I'm notorious for saying to my missus, I'll be back in 5 minutes and then coming back in 7. And I'll be like, it's only 2 minutes. But for her, it's like, no, you said 5 minutes. And I used to think it's nothing. It's like, you know. And I remember once I went for a walk and I said, I'll be back in an hour or so. And I came back 15 minutes late. And my view was kind of like, but you still have 45 minutes to get ready and all that type of stuff. And my wife was super upset. She was like, Maz, you do this a lot. And we were having a bit of a back and forth of like an argument, or like a disagreement. And my daughter was there, and she was like, what are you guys going on about? And we took it as a moment to explain to her what we was actually going through. And I told mommy I was going to be back in an hour. I came back a little bit later, but I knew mommy had a bit more time. Mommy then explained all this kind of stuff, and I had a very strong argument. I thought my argument it stood the test of the court. If that was in court, I would have won that case.
Yeah.
And my daughter just looked at me and said, "Daddy, you should just come back on time." So all the mental of like all the linguistic arithmetic I was doing to articulate my point, I was wrong. Right? I should have come back on time. You can't always sell that to a kid, and I think sometimes in marriage depends if you're the you think like I think very quickly. Like I'm very good at debate. My wife needs more time. So when we would have a thing, I would normally end up winning sometimes, even though I'm wrong, and I'll wake up next time like, babe, I was actually wrong, right? But that moment showed me, it was like, I can't fool. Like there was no form of Shakespearean,
Yeah.
story that I could tell. Um, and then and then she's like, Daddy, you should come back on time. And then I said, okay, cool. But walking is important to me. And she's like, okay, cool. Well, let's go for a walk together. So me and my daughter went for a walk, and then so that's become a little thing as well. But it was like in that moment, I apologized to my wife. My daughter could see that, and we put together a plan as a family. And I think, especially coming from an African household, there are certain cultural things that we do, and it's out of respect. You don't let your children know certain things, and I think there's values in that. But I just think what I didn't want is my daughter to go into marriage or life in general and thinking, oh, my parents don't argue or my parents don't have conflict. And then you go into a marriage where you have that and you don't know how to deal with it. So that's the biggest lesson I've learned is conflict resolution. So we try to get our kids involved in as much as possible. in those kind of conversations. Although my daughter Maya is very curious, and sometimes I have to. This is an adult conversation, so we had to bring back the African, hierarchy sometimes. But because she can be very
Yeah.
inquisitive, but for me, that is like super super important for your children to see that this thing that you said is marriage isn't all roses, because they're always going to compare it to that when they go out to the world. And I hope that it allows them, when they go into the real world, to also know how they can have tough conversations with people, but still stand on what they believe in, and then finding resolution, which I think is what we all need in this
Yeah.
world.
I think it's brilliant that you're conscious of that now
Mhm.
during their formative years.
Yeah.
I want to get on to, we've spoken about business, spoken about like money and business, marriage and family. I'd love to talk about Maz the man
Mhm.
as well. So I don't actually know this about you. Where did you grow up?
So I grew up so I was born in Congo, Democratic Republic, till I was 6. Then I came to the UK, 91.
Okay.
Grew up in North London, predominantly like Tottenham. Moved about a little bit, Wood Green. Yeah, my mom moved to Essex eventually. Yeah, just grew up in North London most of my life.
So what about your childhood has made you the man you are today?
hmm Yeah, I always talk about this. I think this whole concept of translating culture, I think, comes about just on that journey that I've just described to you. So obviously, being Congolese, French speaking, coming to Britain, English speaking, I was what I call, and growing up in Tottenham, and specifically on West Green Road, which is where I'll explain to you in a second, is like, it's a big community of Congolese. Like most Congolese people go there. Like that's like our Peckham, let's say. Even if you don't,
Yeah.
even if you
That
don't,
made so much
yeah,
sense. Okay,
exactly.
cool. Yeah.
um, it was for most of my youth to now. Best way to articulate it, I was a ethnic minority amongst ethnic minorities. So I was the minority amongst ethnic minorities. There weren't many Congolese people that had come to Britain that time. We were a very small community. Um, and I grew up in Tottenham. Tottenham's one of the most multicultural wards I think in Europe. There's like over 183 languages or dialects spoken. It's incredible. So I had friends from all walks of life and whatever. But what I always remember, being on West Green Road, which is the road that has, I think, probably one of the most black-owned businesses there, was really fascinating. I always used to love going to the barber shop, and I'll sit in the barber shop. And what I loved about the barber shop was mum would take me, and then she would go do her shopping, and I'll get my hair cut. But it was like you will hear the aspiration as well as the struggles of the community in the barbershop, especially men's frustration. So guys will come in and talk about some of the challenges they're having at home with their wives, or they lost a job, or they tried to get this bank loan and it didn't work. So I felt like, but I sat there and I was always thinking, well, why don't you just do this? Even as a kid, I was like, but you could just do this and that. And also I didn't articulate this. I was very like problem solving from a young age. But I always enjoyed it because there's always like ways to listen to. I was always like challenging people's logic because things didn't make sense. But there was a culture of support that the barbershop provided, where men could just come and be vulnerable to some extent, but also still be a man's man, right? But for me, it was always like there's so much ways that these things can be solved. Like you're not thinking about it the right way. And I think that as I got older, those formative like experiences kind of just compounded. I always remember my next door neighbor's mum. She took me to play golf, and she took us fishing. She made it a conscious decision that she wanted to take us out of the neighborhood and give us other, um, I guess, experiences. And I would always come back to school the next day and be super excited. I'd be like, "Oh, mate, we went to play golf. It was so sick." And my mates would be like, "Oh, that's a white man's game. That's an old white man's game, right?" And I'd be like, "No, it's sick. You should play it." "Oh, man, is an old white man." Like, do you know what I mean? People just dismiss it. And I remember having a conversation with one of my friends. He was actually a rapper, a shocker. Um, he's now a mental health activist. Um, and he said something to me that still strikes me today. He says he knows kids in his neighborhood in Broadwalk Farm that never left Tottenham. And I was like, that's impossible. When you think about it, they went to school. Their nursery was literally within the council, the estate. They probably went to primary school down the road. At worst, they maybe went to Wood Green to buy some stuff, but they never actually left. And you gotta realize a lot of people as well, maybe depending on their immigration status, they've never had to go on holiday. And I was like, gosh, that is true, right? Like your worldview is just this community that you come from. I think all of those things, when I packaged that together with my friend's mum, who made it, it was almost her mission for me and her son to just get all these different experiences. It just made me curious, like that there's a world is bigger than where we come from, but there's almost so much, there's also a lot of richness of where we come from that this part of the world needs to understand. So that whole translating culture aspect of it is kind of been a bit of a mission of mine to do that. And I think I've built relationships based on that as well. So like our good friend Andy, when he went to Silicon Valley and he came back, it was like, it's as if I traveled with him. He traveled 49 countries, but I would just go to his house every Sunday and Saturday just to hear stories. It's like, well, that saves me thousands of pounds of traveling. You've done the traveling, I take the lessons,
Yeah.
right? So that's been my journey, just kind of being, listening and just adapting to other people's cultures and understanding it, and then also realizing the commonalities that we have with Congo and Nigeria and stuff, understanding there is such thing as Black culture, like food and all this type of stuff, like you can't easily articulate. You can only experience.
Thanks for that context, guys. I didn't actually realize you were born in Congo.
Yeah.
So we've got like 5 minutes on the timer. 3 more questions that I want to ask you. So as a Black man in the UK in the 21st century, what does masculinity mean to you?
Oh, very interesting question. I think we touched on it earlier. It's actually around being present in the storm and in the good times, right? And I think one thing that my wife and my team and my children can say is that I'm present. And when there's a bang downstairs, my wife doesn't get up the bed. Even my children expect me to go get up, but it's a natural instinct to do so. So it's being present, but more, and especially for me, I have a Christian faith, is also showing that I can stand strong in the storm, but I also know that when things become too difficult for me, my children and my wife can see me pray, get on my knees and pray. What that means is I also have a certain level of self-awareness that I can't, for lack of an analogy, say kill Goliath myself, right? So for me, masculinity is being present in the storm and in the fun times, but also being able to show that in that presence there is something bigger than you that you can call upon when no one else might be able to support. And I think for me that comes through faith. Just my family knowing that in any situation that comes, I will try my personal, physical, mental, and best, but I also feel that I have a spiritual support as of when needed. Because my kids think I'm a superhero. They're like, Daddy, you're so strong. But it might be a situation where I may not be able to pick up something that day, right? And also understand I have limitations as a man and not feel scared of that. Because sometimes some men almost feel like, my friend would say, what's the term? Wrong but strong.
Yeah.
I think that's the wrong type of masculinity, because life will challenge you, and you don't want to, get that wrong. So for me, it's that being present, but also in that presence, knowing that when you've tried something, I've given my best, but I'm gonna have to rely on something much bigger than me to help us on this challenge.
Thank you for giving us all that blueprint to follow.
Thank you.
Our final question is, and this goes to all the guests, what does Black wealth mean to you?
Ooh. I think for me is what we just discussed. I think the nuclear family, marriage and values, is what Black wealth means to me. I always my friends always find it funny. I always celebrate when my mates get married or engaged more than I celebrate if they did 7 to 8 figures in their business, because I know, to that point that Shopi made, is you don't need another business idea, you need a wife. I think if you find the right partner, it's almost unexplainable how it works. I know the Bible talks about, he who finds a wife finds the favor of the Lord, which I think is a great analogy in the fact that, when you find somebody who loves you outside of yourself, is a reflection of the love that you need for you to be a bundle of joy, to be a bundle of purpose. It's like you're not looking for other admiration. You're really focusing on this union that you've built. So I would hope for more nuclear families, more love and support for one another. I think that's, for me, it means more than money and anything, because money is a byproduct of that. Anyway,
Maz, founder of Translate Culture, thank you so much for coming on.
thank you, sir.